Me? Yes. Yeah, Ron. Ron Edmonds. Yeah, I've been here a long time. It's almost 20 years when I bought a place here, and ferries were the least of the concern of living on an island. You're much more concerned about the time it took to get back and forth rather than the cost. And we bought a place here with the idea that our kids are moving to the West Coast and this would be a family gathering point. And the problem we have now is they can't afford to come unless we subsidize them. So we end up paying for the ferry for our kids to come over, particularly the two that live on the mainland, so coming over from Vancouver. That's a huge trip to come over for a visit. If they were planning their vacation, they could fly someplace like Las Vegas and include hotels and everything for a long weekend, cheaper than they can come to Hornby Island. And so we end up subsidizing our kids in order to get to see them. The idea of a good gathering place for family worked, but it's become too expensive for people to come very often. The changes really became quite profound after the government privatized the ferries, or sort of privatized the ferries. But if we listen to your 6 principles of how these are supposed to operate, we're screwed. I mean, particularly the user pay, you know, we're stuck with that. And like Doug said, never anticipated when you bought here of where ferry prices were going, because at that time it was part of the highway system, and highways are subsidized for everybody, and highways are still subsidized. And ferries are subsidized in the interior. Saskatchewan has cable ferries on the rivers that are free, and they're part of the highway system. And this summer we took the ferry from Port Hardy and went all the way up to Skagway. And Alaska very proudly proclaims their ferries as part of the Alaska Marine Highway, and are very proud of that connection. And I'm sure that those have to be heavily subsidized for small population and long routes. I'm sure that has to be heavily subsidized, but they're very proud of the fact that these are government employees and this is a government ferry system. And we certainly subsidize the highways for lots of people, but I guess it's just part of a whole political drift toward people don't want to pay taxes and let everybody pay for whatever they get and don't charge me anything for it if I'm not getting direct benefit. But as Doug pointed out, there's a lot of indirect benefits to people in Courtenay and the Comox Valley. I too have started to become an internet shopper, and you used to go into Courtenay just to shop. Now we almost never go in except for doctor's appointments, and then shopping is sandwiched around various necessary trips to town. And we used to go in much more frequently to shop, and now it's just whenever we happen to go in for an appointment. So things certainly have changed, and as Doug said, Economics 101, you increase the cost and people buy less of whatever you're offering, unless that demand is very inflexible. And it is inflexible to people who live here, but even we're buying less of it now that the price has gone up so much. It becomes significant. It's ironic that as a senior, my fares are now subsidized, which I very much appreciate, but I could afford to pay. My kids that can't afford to pay, and they aren't subsidized unless I do. Thank you.
Tony and then Carol.
Well, after reading all this, I'm a bit disillusioned, and I just feel like the province itself, the government is not looking at this in a more global situation in terms of transportation and the delivery of transportation. it's not serving the public anymore. This particular system is not serving us at all. It's not responding to the issues that we're facing today. And these have been well documented over the last few years, and there's been a lot of meetings with the BC ferry system and that. I would never get involved in that process because I know it's not going anywhere. And that's what I'm a little concerned about, is this thing going to go anywhere with your recommendations? I feel strongly that the province should be a little more responsive to public concerns, and I don't think they're doing that right now. We're paying through the nose, either in taxes. I mean, you go to the co-op here and you pay $6.40 for a gallon of milk. Now, milk is one of the primary necessary foods for young families, but you're paying $6.40 for a gallon of milk. I mean, that's ridiculous. When you go to a town and you can pay $4 and maybe 50 cents, or less than that. So, and they're still making a profit on that, you know. And I don't know. I would have liked to have seen actually somebody from our co-op here today, because I imagine they've got some really good figures on what all the extra costs that have been incurred over the last few years to bring supplies into our community. And it's, you know, and the ferry system itself, it's not just Vancouver Island people are coming. You've got people coming from Vancouver. They're paying $50 or whatever, far less than what we are. And then they hit our terminal and they get hit up with $70 or $90, and they may have a card that maybe offsets some of the cost. But that trip in itself, you know, from a tourist point of view, is bloody expensive. To, you know, 3 or 4 ferry systems, your gas, and then you get here, you know, and everything's expensive. A lot of people bring food to the island now. They can't afford to buy it. You know, I mean, everybody's bringing food to the island. So really, the co-op is not benefiting from that. So I think what you guys can do, I would take it a little more seriously and do an impact analysis or impact assessments of what's happening on these islands. Not just from, you know, because ferries is the biggest, it's our access point, and for everybody. And there isn't, I think you need to do a more thorough analysis of what's happening in our community. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to say anymore.
Okay. I'm Carol Quinn, Tony's wife, and I've lived here for about 40 years. Had my children grow up here, chose to live here. Really liked the community and the self-sufficiency which we became very proud of here, building our own community buildings, and as all the activities that have gone on over the years. I won't repeat everything everybody has already said. It was cheap on the ferries in those days. That's not why we came here. We came here because we liked it, but we were quite happy to stay. And as time went on, the raising ferry fares did change our lifestyle a lot. We'd go off island for our trips to the parks and hiking, those sorts of things, often with a lot more forethought because of the cost of taking a day trip. I'm sure that affects the minds of people who are coming over here. We used to have friends that come over for the day and we'd go walking in the parks and on the beaches. It's a big effort, not an effort so much as just a big cost for people to come here and have lunch or come over for a concert and stay overnight or any of those things. In looking at your list of policies that you say are in the Coastal Ferry Act that are up for review, I didn't catch them all, so I think maybe we'll find out on one of Tony's emails. The sustainability to the operator and looking for alternative providers, those sorts of minimal operational expenses, and I missed number 5 altogether. And user pay goal, as somebody pointed out here, none of those have anything to do with the people they're providing this to provide the service for. unless there's already something I missed when you were mentioning them. And so I'm very glad to hear that you're here to take a look at that, but if that's not in the act and it's not in your mandate, then I'm afraid that you may find it's nice to get started and hear from us all, but you'll hit a dead wall when you go to make your recommendations. Even if you do, and I hope and appreciate, I hope you will and appreciate your coming. Also appreciate well, I'll leave that. I got an idea while you were sitting here, hearing all these things. I haven't been here. I've been hearing bits of them about the ferries, things that could make the ferries better, ways the province could save money, alternate routes, ways of sharing the costs or eliminating expensive maintenance costs. And I'm hoping that perhaps one of the things you might do, in addition to have a lay group of people talking to you one at a time or in little groups like this, have some sort of a user and user provider advisory committee that you could hear a lot of this firsthand information about what might work to make things go better. My own story, having moved here and how it has changed my life, is that, and I'm certainly glad we now have a clinic and doctors here, although I do have a doctor in town just in case. And I don't like going to town to go to medical doctors because we don't get any kind of ferry relief for that, and it's a bit far away. But if we didn't have a doctor, we would be reliant on doing that, and I always have that in the back of my mind, that we'd have to go, and we do have to go for all tests, and I do appreciate the BC VHAS, whoever it is, discount card, pink slip we call it. We get to go for medical expenses, what do you call it? Specialty services, it's the word they use. But I don't, other than that, as somebody pointed out, we very rarely go to town anymore. We do try to support the co-op, keep it viable. We're all going to be stuck here. We're going to find out when the ferry's down for good, for a week or early in a month. But we don't go to town except for a few groups who go with New Horizons, the seniors group. I don't think many of us go to town to take in any entertainment or sports events, or unless you're going in anyway. And so it has changed our lives in that respect. But more than that, what it affects is the economy here, people coming here to use the services provided by people who came, set up their homes and businesses to provide those services, and particularly in the summer. And it also is affecting our families coming and going, and that's been well pointed out to you today. Friends coming and going, even though it would bring money to the islands and to the BC ferries if they weren't so expensive. It's almost like you should have a sale, because we all flock to the store that's having things on sale. And it was a relief when they did lower some of the ferry fares for a little while, but they've gone up again. So my own biggest fear is when we have to leave this island because of the lack of elder care here. We have elder housing and we have good doctors, but at some point a lot of people have to move off to Qualicum, Parksville, Courtenay, Comox Valley. It's very difficult to visit those people. It's very separating for people to have to be that far from here. But it's also difficult for people who have to leave now. It's becoming more difficult to sell your house and have any money left over to purchase or support yourself later on. And I think that's making some people think about leaving earlier. I don't know when it's good to go anymore because of the real estate prices dropping, but that's something that a lot of people think of. And I actually, when we retired and sold our business here in nursery, we thought about moving off at that time because of health issues and being close to the hospital and all that sort of thing. And it's just, with the ferry considerations, it's a big, big decision. But we decided to stay, so we're stuck here now.
I think this would cover what I was going to ask about, and that was whatever the Highways Act is, how in whose power was it to say that coastal ferries, saltwater ferries if you like, we've been bumped up 8%, whereas interior freshwater ferries are free, as they are in other communities far removed from our coastal system? Who made the decision that we have to pay? Why are not coastal ferries free as well? As an extension of the highway.
So you're asking me the question?
Yes, I'm
Sure.
asking, how is it that came to be that the highways, that we stopped recognizing the ferry system as an extension of the highways? Who decided that? Who made the change?
Well, I'll tell you what I know about the interior ferries, which isn't a lot, but as we've been traveling, a lot of people who do know a fair bit about it have spoken up. We aren't responsible for administering the inland ferries, so it's out of our jurisdiction. That's one of the reasons we don't know that much about it. What we're told, though, is that...
Speak up. Speak up.
Okay, sorry. What we're told is that, at some point in time when they were building dams in the interior and flooding valleys, there was commitments made to provide for free ferry service in exchange for whatever else people had to deal with. So there's some historic background there. I don't know very much about it, but it's got something to do with the development of the interior. And I honestly don't know the history of how ferry fares, have unfolded in the past. So do you, Sheldon, want to say any more about this?
No, I don't. I mean, to my knowledge, the coastal ferries have never been free, even going back to the building. But I'll defer to the master, the captain, who probably knows more about the history of the start of BC Ferries than I, but to my knowledge, they've never been free.
I think they started paying in 10-foot increments. So if you had a little car, it was so much. Other car, but they always had a little bit of money attached to it.
But they were so reasonable in the Wacky Bennett days, and he developed a fleet of 42 boats, and I did their first illustration of their first ferry and their first brochure, so I go back with their history and watching the changes as they came about, and they keep stepping it up, different governments and different decisions and different fee rates, and what's going on right now is just pure rip-off, and it's hurting communities, hurting people desperately. And I realize that it is not within your power to, and perhaps not your job either, as you explained, to address that. But where do we go from here? What can we do about it?
So I've got myself, and then I've got Verna, Fred, and Doug wants to speak a second time. And Betty. Okay.
Yeah,
Sure,
sorry.
Sorry. So, just go back to the free ferries. As my understanding, when the Liberals came into power, they were originally planning on introducing a fee for them, but the political reaction they got was such that they backed off. Anyway, going back to, I think one point that's being made is with W.C. Bennett, when he introduced the ferry system, it was with the intent of supporting, development on the coast. And our communities have developed. We've built community halls, businesses have established, infrastructure established, people have built homes, and social networks have established. And then to undermine it by adding charges that make it hard to sustain what's been developed is not logical. And so I think in terms of social and economic development, I think that's a factor that needs to be looked at. But going back to the principles, I think if you look at ferries, there's the level of service, the cost of providing the service on one hand, there's the fares and the government contribution on the other. So those are the kind of the four ingredients that can be juggled. And I think in terms of expenses, I would like to see the Commissioner have more ability to oversee expenses. I know with the current proposal that was provided by information that was provided by BC Ferries, your predecessor Commissioner asked various questions, wanted more information, and BC Ferries responded saying you've not got the legislative authority to ask for that, so I'd like to see you be given the legislative authority to go a little deeper. I think one of the challenges now has been alluded to, that there's been a bunch of BC Ferries was handed over a very rundown system because when the province was running the system, it was not appropriately replacing vessels and terminals, and now there's a huge amount of catch-up to be done that's been paid for out of the fare box because the province has not been increasing its contribution. So I agree with the submission that the province should be paying for capital procurement, not necessarily controlling the procurement, but certainly should be paying for it. And I think going back to the principles, the principle of user pay, when the province announced the Coastal Ferry Act, it said it would provide modest and predictable increases. Well, while you've got this vague requirement for user pay, that is incredible uncertainty, and that principle should not be in the Act. There's no way that those principles are ones that the Commissioner is supposed to administer, and yet the Commissioner has absolutely no sense of what to do with that provision. I've been to met with successive ministers and senior officials in the province and said, okay, what's meant by user pay? How far does it go? And none of them have been able to interpret it because, you know, the ministers and staff have changed it from those that developed the Act. So I think that principle is meaningless. It creates a lot of uncertainty and fear and does not create a good climate for people and businesses to make decisions. It creates uncertainty for the Commissioner, so that needs to be addressed. As you say, the Commissioner cannot control what decisions the province does, but I think the Commissioner, now that there's a requirement to look at the public interest, the interest of ferry users, that the Commissioner at the very least should be making a recommendation on an appropriate service fee for the province, so that's publicly available, and then the province will have to justify why it's not paying the appropriate service fee to ensure that the interests of ferry users are taken into account. So I'll go to Verna, Fred, Betty, and Doug.
Well, actually, you said a lot that I was going to say. My thing is that I've heard is from listening to the principles, and that's the whole, the first one was you must be self-sustaining. All these things that we're talking about, is all the fare increases, everything else, the lack of shipbuilding is because of that line that they have to make money, or, you know, where they're not a, it should be a service provided, not partially by our taxes and everything else. And that the way their business is, the way you're instructed, they can't. They have to be a business that makes money. That's it.
Fred?
A question first before a comment. Could you say more about your role in setting a cap? What exactly is a cap and how does that work?